Hello everyone and welcome. Make a cup of your favorite drink and get comfortable because this is a wonderful time for news stories from Yellow Cat. Send your own stories in the comments below and maybe they'll be in our new video. Subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed yet, and let's get started. Employees, how did you fire your bosses? Part 8. My boss attempted to blame my subcategories and me for the department's failure to meet its targets. I suppose he was under a lot of pressure, but he used to be a really nice guy. It's likely that the CEO felt a lot of pressure pressing down on him. It appears as though the CEO was using my boss as a buffer to keep his job, and I was being used as a buffer by my boss. In any case, in order to identify when something was falling behind schedule, my boss began keeping track of everything I was working on as well as the deadlines for each project. That was a huge letdown because I usually worked on multiple projects at once because in our industry, lead times for particular projects can occasionally slip through no fault of our own. This way, I have options to change course if necessary. This means that the dates I initially set for myself are not set in stone, and the intention was to always have something available on the launch calendar rather than to have everything arrive on time. I cared too much to make sure that there was always something, so I worked on things in parallel. I did not like that being used against me and making things harder than they needed to be. Nevertheless, he was breathing down my neck and recording everything for 2 months. It was ridiculous because for performing well the year before, I had received performance bonuses in the higher range just 2 months earlier. Then I found myself on a performance improvement plan overnight. Regardless, my fight-or-flight response took over and I began exerting more effort to survive. However, until the very last moment, my boss believed it was not going to happen. That, I suppose, saved my A most of the time, but it also meant that my boss was likely on the bubble to save the CEO and could no longer use me as a sacrificial buffer. For the most part, I battled to survive, and in the process, I outlasted my boss, who was let go. Well, easiest way was simple. Did not clean store up. Allow me to clarify. My regional manager was also leaving, along with my original, incredibly kind boss. A new one was on her way, and she was nasty. To put it mildly, she would get upset if she had to make your sandwich, from Subway if you're interested. Few minutes after she started going over my paperwork, which I had up for manager, it was destroyed. I was torn because when I quit to work somewhere else, my first job, which would have given me higher qualifications, had disappeared. She also adhered to the feminist philosophy of women over men more. So if she needed anything done, a guy would usually do it. He would ridicule me and call me worthless whenever she got the chance. The 2 employees who were there at the time also departed in different ways. One stated they would stay for 2 weeks but left a few days later, and the other just up and left. She was employed there for about a year, but it seemed like much longer. She convinced me that I had to tidy up the store for the night because her supervisors were coming in the next morning, which kept me from quitting. I didn't even have an evening shift scheduled. Still, I obeyed like a dog whose tail was between its legs. Like any other night, I went in and did nothing but wash the dishes and arrange the food. Because I had to get up for a scheduled morning shift, I did the bare minimum. I opened the store the following day, and about 5 people came in. The CEO was supposed to arrive shortly, but he never did. When my new boss arrived at 11 o'clock, the soot on the floor caused her skin to turn pale. The CFO was furious with me at the time that we were speaking. I had no right to check the cameras with her, so she was furious when she discovered it was almost true. After attempting to rehire her at his store, her husband was fired and she was given 2 weeks to leave. In summary, justice was done. Not fired, but permanently reassigned/sidelined. That was a long time ago. I had worked there for roughly 6 months. My supervisor was insane. That's not meant to be disparaging. She had some sort of unidentified personality disorder after all. Bonus, she was the daughter of the CEO. She had extreme ADHD, but she was also incredibly disorganized. A jumble of long-forgotten sticky notes littered her desk. A mountain of invoices and old change orders littered her desk. She'd have me stay up late rearranging files in massive filing cabinets instead of dealing with any of the bills or sticky notes. After they were rearranged slightly, she would change her mind, ask me to stay late, and reorganize them. She was manic every day of that time. Arms flailing, bug-eyed, incredibly stressed out, etc. This continued for several months. I started losing my S because I was so stressed out. I once lost it on a foolish person over the phone. I lost track of its topic. Generally, I was pretty good at dealing with idiots. However, I was broken by this one. My insane boss gave me a speech about manners. I was then called to the vice president's office. I assumed I was let go. I was indifferent. I was asked to go outside with the vice president. He asked me why, on the phone, I lost it with the customer. I told him that I had run out of options. The boss lady was driving me insane with her crazy behavior. I told him about the daily erratic behavior, the endless mounds of hoarded paperwork, and the late nights spent sorting files for no reason. I informed him that I had boundaries, and today I reached them. I noticed him furrowing his brow as we spoke. He was aware of my accuracy, but she was the daughter of the CEO. He warned me not to talk too much on the phone. This would be a spoken caution to act appropriately. I concurred. After a week, her assignment was changed. She would be employed by the HR woman doing strategic messaging or some other nonsense, I'm not sure. But for some reason, the vice president decided she wasn't fit to be in charge of staff, so he put her in an office to create PowerPoints. Around $100,000 per year or so. The replacement manager was excellent. We grew close to one another. At his house, the team would have drinks and dinner, etc. Everything was quiet. There was already a small amount of bitterness in my team because he was completely useless, accomplished very little, and conveniently placed the blame for it on us. I was careful not to say anything too critical, but I did make sure to poke that from time to time. After the team was fully against him, I spoke with our CEO and someone else who was much higher up than him on a few occasions. I'm close to both of them, and they both have faith in me. Made sure they understood that this guy was an incompetent jerk who would drive out the entire team in a matter of months if nothing was done. And this was crucial because the office had a high turnover rate, which the manager of the larger office, the boss of the jerk, was being pressed to address. So now, the team being about the guy from below, the executive team pushing for it to be fixed from above, it only took another week before we were pulled aside one by one and asked our thoughts on the guy. The following day, he was gone. Regretfully, I'm currently focusing on the office manager. Shouldn't be too difficult, the executive team's worried about the lack of progress in leadership since he joined, so I'll be fueling that fire in the appropriate places for the next month or so, and we should be set to go. Residents of a terrible HOA or those who have terrible neighbors, share your stories. Part 8. I live next to an intersection, and whoever designed the neighborhood thought it was a good idea to put a tree in front of a stop sign. The tree grew pretty big, completely covering it up. The HOA sent us a letter telling us to trim the branches, and we replied asking if we could just cut it down, but they told us that if we did, we would have to replace it with a new one. After that, they decided to put up another stop sign on the other side of the road since it's a one-way street. We were also relieved that the wind had torn down the tree, but they told us to replace it. Another time, the HOA told us our house needed to be repainted along with the rest of the neighborhood. We had talked to a painting company to paint our house before this. We put up a sign in our yard of the company that would be painting our house. We got multiple letters from our HOA saying we need to paint our house or there will be consequences. We replied to all of them saying we couldn't get it painted until a certain day because of the schedule, but when we got it painted, they stopped. I was raised in a very big one, big enough to stand alone as a town. It's a Maryland suburb of Ocean City. There are 3 categories of residents. 1, retirees, most of whom are from major mid-Atlantic cities. 2, owners of beach houses who either stayed in them for a few weeks during the summer or rented them out. 3, brand new households, usually quite a broad middle class. Though they belonged to a minority, these young people were the only ones with a genuine need to form a community. They didn't allow trick-or-treating. They had a token Parks and Rec department that was really there to maintain a uniform mess around the beach club, yacht, and pool area for Bloody Marys and wading pools. They took great care to ensure that nothing would change for 20 years. They'd be deed if they want to build even a sidewalk because they came to Ocean City to escape the high cost of living and taxes. Let's go back to the late 90s. The pioneer families are now teenagers, the number of young families has increased, and the original elderly population has passed away. At last, they've scraped up enough cash for a YMCA. Recovering the money from the yacht club took more than 10 years. Enough funds are provided to Parks and Recreation for the construction bond. It's put to a second vote, which it narrowly passes this time, and the construction budget's reduced. When the construction bond's released, it'll cost roughly $500,000 more than anticipated. The why would have to be because the entire department was constructed on top of a swamp. It should come as no surprise that it takes time to build. The assessment would need to go up $3 a month in order to pay for it. The seniors all recite the tired 20-year-old line that they deep-pocketed this place in order to escape development and nobody would go. Remember that the general contractor received payment in advance. They had to construct something, so they covered one of the pools with a roof. For the common people, one of the family pools, not the sailing club. It was given a roof so that it could be used in inclement weather. However, that wasn't how the pool was designed. Instead, it's a roof that only creates a chlorine greenhouse and blocks out breezes. And that was on the condition that right next to it, you put a war memorial. We received several letters threatening to fine us for painting our front door red when, according to them, it should have been blue. Our front door has always been red, and that's the only thing. They insisted that the house was blue at first, even after I showed them old photos of it. Since we moved in here originally, the house has always been red. At last, I said, look, I'll change it if you can show that it was blue originally. The letters ceased when they were unable to. They also complained that our grass was about half an inch too long. Half of the lawns on the block were still dead from the drought at the time we replaced the grass with new sod, making ours the nicest looking lawn on the block. They stopped tampering with us after my wife went down there and corrected them. One year, I rented a house, and like many other houses in the neighborhood, it didn't have a driveway, so you had to park on the street. It was simple to wind up parking on the sidewalk because the curbs were similar to those tiny slope curbs to the sidewalk. Many residents have complained to the HOA about the safety hazard, and I understand why. Many families go for walks on the sidewalk, and some people were parking over half of it. HOA hired a police officer to issue tickets to drivers who park on the curb. The tickets were issued on a random basis, so you never knew when they would be issued. Furthermore, they issued tickets for failing to use the curb sufficiently. One evening, after a long day at work, I was completely worn out when I got home. Like usual, I parked my car, went inside, and went to bed. When I came outside the following morning, I discovered a beautiful $200 parking fine for using the sidewalk. I was parked about 2 inches from the top of the curb, not on the sidewalk. I took pictures of it because I intended to fight it. Since I wasn't on the sidewalk, I didn't want to pay for something I didn't do, and I reasoned that the police officer would be better off elsewhere than coming in to issue a curb parking ticket. Entering, I was thinking, okay, I have pictures to prove to the judge I wasn't on the sidewalk. To my luck, a police officer arrived. The judge says I have to turn in my phone as evidence, which means I won't get it back for a few weeks, and I'll have to come back for a retrial in order for them to view the pictures on it. Additionally, the police officer added that I received this ticket because my mirror's tip was blocking the pathway by crossing the line separating the sidewalk from the curb. I was forced to pay the parking ticket in full by the judge. I began parking a little lower on the curb, and a little over a week later, I received yet another ticket, this time for parking too close to the curb. I went in to fight it, printing out pictures this time, and the policeman who issued my first ticket was also the one who issued my second. The cops claimed I parked 0.5 inches too low, and the judge ultimately decided in their favor because the car could have been moved for the pictures, required to pay an additional $200. The best part was that the HOA head had a reputation for parking his nice truck on the curb to avoid getting hit. As it turned out, no one received a ticket for him, and everyone knew it. After a discussion, it was revealed that the police officer issuing the tickets was actually the head of the HOA's closest friend. One of the wine moms went off on him at one of the neighborhood gatherings, threatening to send her lawyer husband after him, and suddenly the cops stopped showing up. At the same meeting, the head of the HOA was removed from office along with those board members who supported him. A new board was immediately elected. So, thank you, Wine Mom. If you want to watch the part 7, click the link here. We're very glad to see you all in the comments again. Many thanks for support.